The velvet box arrived at 11:43 p.m., carried through a thunderstorm by a man who refused to give his name. Sophie Lane noticed him because everyone else entering Terminal 4 looked angry, exhausted, or afraid of missing a flight. This man looked as though he had already accepted that he would not live long enough to board one. Water ran from the shoulders of his gray coat. His left hand trembled against the lost and found counter. There was a dark stain beneath his ribs, almost hidden by the wet fabric. "You need medical help," Sophie said. The man ignored her. His eyes moved toward the security cameras, then toward the nearly empty concourse behind her. "Are you Sophie Lane?" The question froze her. Her name tag was turned backward. She had flipped it around 20 minutes earlier, after an irritated passenger threatened to report her for refusing to release a suitcase without identification. "Who are you?" He placed a small black velvet box on the counter. The movement seemed to cost him the last of his strength. "Do not give this to airport security." Sophie looked at the box but did not touch it. "Then you brought it to the wrong desk." "No." His voice dropped to a strained whisper. "Your mother said you would know when not to follow the rules." The storm seemed to vanish. Sophie could still see lightning beyond the terminal windows. She could still hear announcements echoing above rows of stranded passengers. Yet everything inside her narrowed around two words. "Your mother. My mother has been missing for 14 years. The man's gaze softened with something dangerously close to pity. "I know." Sophie came around the counter, but he stumbled backward. "Where is she?" He looked toward the arrival's doors. Fear sharpened his face. "They found me." The terminal lights went out. For 3 seconds, JFK disappeared into complete darkness. Someone screamed near the baggage claim. A child began crying. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing the terminal in a deep red glow. When Sophie looked back, the stranger was gone. Only the velvet box remained. She should have called the Port Authority police. She should have stepped away and waited for security. Instead, she picked up the box. Inside lay a heavy black ring engraved with a silver crest. A crown split by a blade, surrounded by 7 stars. Beneath it was a folded piece of paper. Sophie opened the note. "Midnight. Service Hangar 12. Dante Bellini dies before his plane leaves the ground." Below the warning was a symbol Sophie had not seen since childhood. A small crescent drawn through the letter L, her mother's mark. The same symbol had been carved inside the wooden music box Sophie kept locked beneath her bed. A sound rose outside the terminal. Engines. Not one vehicle. Many. Black SUVs swept through the rain and stopped in formation beyond the glass. Men in dark suits emerged before the doors had fully opened. Passengers fell silent as the group entered. The man walking at the center did not need to. Everything around him seemed to understand that the night belonged to him. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly cut black overcoat over a charcoal suit. Rain darkened his hair. His face was controlled and severe, the kind of face that revealed nothing because revealing emotion had once been dangerous. His men spread through the terminal without speaking. Airport security officers reached for their radios, then hesitated when one of the suited men displayed credentials. Sophie did not recognize the stranger approaching her counter, but she recognized the crest on his cufflinks. The same crown, the same blade, the same 7 stars. He stopped on the opposite side of the counter. His eyes moved to her face, then to her closed hand. "Open your fingers." The command was calm. That made it more frightening. Sophie tightened her grip around the ring. "Who are you?" The terminal manager hurried toward them, pale and breathless. "Miss Lane, do exactly as Mr. Bellini says. Dante Bellini." The name from the note. Sophie looked back at the man in front of her. He was supposed to die in 17 minutes. Dante's attention remained on her fist. "Open your hand." "You first." Something shifted behind his eyes. Not anger. Surprise. "Explain who you are," Sophie said. "Why your men are surrounding an airport, and why a dying stranger knew my mother's name." Several of Dante's bodyguards looked at one another. They appeared less shocked that she was refusing him than fascinated by the fact that she was still alive after doing it. Dante leaned one hand against the counter. "I will ask once more, and I'll refuse once more." Their eyes locked. Sophie felt the force of him then, not simply his size or the armed men surrounding him, but the terrible stillness of someone accustomed to controlling rooms without raising his voice. He looked like danger refined into human form. Yet beneath his control, Sophie saw something else. He was watching her as though he recognized her. Dante spoke without looking away. "Close the terminal." The manager blinked. "Sir, no flights depart." No vehicles leave. Lock every public entrance and ground every aircraft assigned to this concourse. You cannot shut down an international terminal. Dante turned his head slightly. The manager stopped speaking. Within seconds, radios crackled across the building. Steel security barriers began descending over distant entrances. Airline boards flashed from delayed to canceled. Angry passengers surged toward the counters. Dante's men formed a silent perimeter. Sophie stared at him. You just trapped hundreds of people inside an airport. No. He looked back at her clenched hand. I trapped the person who gave you my ring. She slowly opened her fingers. For the first time, Dante Bellini lost control of his expression. It lasted less than a second, but Sophie saw it. Shock, then fear. He took the ring from her palm without touching her skin. Where did you get this? A man brought it here. What man? He was injured. Gray coat. About 50. He said my mother told him I would know when not to follow the rules. Dante looked toward one of his men. Find him. The bodyguard moved immediately. Sophie slid the assassination note across the counter. Don't you read it? His face became colder with every word. One of his men approached. The plane is fueled. We can move you to the secondary airfield. No. Dante, this is an active threat. I'm aware. We need to leave. Dante folded the note and placed it in his coat. His gaze settled on Sophie. I am not leaving this airport without her. The words made something tighten beneath Sophie's ribs. I'm not going anywhere with you. You are already involved. I found a ring. You were selected to find it. That does not make me your prisoner. No, Dante said. It makes you the only person in this terminal my enemy needs alive. Before Sophie could answer, every monitor in the terminal changed. Flight information vanished. A grainy surveillance image appeared instead. It showed Sophie standing behind the lost and found counter 2 nights earlier. Then the image changed. Sophie leaving work. Sophie boarding the employee shuttle. Sophie entering her apartment building in Queens. A final photograph filled every screen. Sophie asleep beside her bedroom window. Her breath stopped. A digital timer appeared beneath the photograph. 0:12:12. 12 minutes. Dante turned toward the terminal windows. Get her down. The glass exploded. He reached Sophie before she heard the gunshot. Dante drove her behind the counter, covering her with his body as shattered glass rained over them. His men drew weapons. Passengers screamed and scattered beneath the red emergency lights. Another shot struck the wall where Sophie had been standing. Dante's arm tightened around her shoulders. His face was inches from hers. Are you hurt? She could barely breathe. No. He looked over her with brutal concentration, as though refusing to trust her answer. A thin cut marked his cheek from the flying glass. You're bleeding. It is not mine that concerns me. The words landed between them with alarming intimacy. Gunfire erupted outside. Dante's men returned fire toward the parking structure. He pulled Sophie against his chest and moved them along the floor toward a service door behind the counter. She could feel his heartbeat. It was steady. Too steady. He guided her through the door and into a narrow employee corridor. 3 bodyguards followed. Another remained behind, to cover their retreat. Sophie pulled away the moment the door closed. Those photographs were taken inside my apartment. Yes, you knew I was being watched. Dante's silence answered before he did. How long? This is not the place. How long have you known someone was following me? 14 months. She stared at him. 14 months. She remembered the strange black sedan outside her building. The new security camera installed by a landlord who never repaired anything. The feeling of being watched on late-night walks home. That was you. Some of it. The distinction chilled her more than a confession would have. You had me followed? I had you protected. You put cameras near my home. I put men near your home. The cameras inside were not mine. Sophie stepped backward. Dante reached toward her, then stopped before touching her. The interruption was small, but she noticed it. A man accustomed to taking whatever he needed had chosen restraint. Whoever photographed you inside your bedroom knew how to move past my security, he said. That means they are close to me. You expect me to trust you because someone worse broke into my apartment? No. His eyes darkened. I expect you to survive long enough to decide whether you hate me. An alarm sounded overhead. The corridor doors slammed shut at both ends. One of Dante's men tried his radio. Only static answered. The terminal network is compromised, he said. They are locking us into sectors. The lights flickered. A mechanical grinding began beneath the floor. Sophie knew that sound. The baggage system. Dante looked at her. They are restarting the conveyors remotely, she said. This corridor leads to the sorting level. If they lock the upper terminal, the tunnels are the only way to reach Hangar 12. You know the underground routes? I've worked here for 6 years. Dante's bodyguard tested the sealed door. We can break through. It will take too long, Sophie said. The maintenance entrance is behind the records room. Dante studied her for one silent beat. Then he nodded. Lead. She should not have felt the word like trust. But she did. They descended beneath JFK through a maintenance hatch behind a wall of unclaimed luggage. The air changed immediately. The polished brightness of the terminal gave way to concrete tunnels, steel tracks, and roaring conveyor belts. Suitcases rushed past them through the darkness, like sealed pieces of abandoned lives. Dante stayed close behind Sophie. Not touching, never more than a step away. One of his men moved ahead. The other two watched the rear. Sophie's mind spun faster than the belts around her. Her mother had once brought her to JFK when Sophie was 16. They had sat near the International Arrivals Board for 2 hours without boarding a flight or meeting anyone. When Sophie asked why they were there, her mother had smiled and said airports were perfect places for people who needed to disappear. 3 weeks later, Evelyn Lane vanished. Nobody. No ransom demand. No explanation. Only an abandoned car near the Hudson River and a police investigation that slowly turned her mother into a woman who had chosen to leave. Sophie had never believed it. Now she was walking beneath the same airport with a mafia boss who had watched her for over a year. Tell me about the ring, she said. Dante's gaze remained on the tunnel ahead. It belonged to my father. Then how did my mother get it? I do not know that she did. The man said she gave it to him. He may have lied. You knew her. Dante did not answer. Sophie stopped walking. His bodyguard turned sharply, but Dante raised one hand. The tunnel thundered around them. You knew my mother, Sophie repeated. Yes. The word struck harder than she expected. How? She managed financial accounts for my family. My mother was a payroll auditor. That was one of her identities. Sophie almost laughed, but there was nothing humorous in the pain moving through her. You're telling me my mother worked for the mafia? I am telling you she kept records for men who killed to keep those records hidden. Was she one of them? No. The certainty in his answer made Sophie look at him. Dante's face had not softened, but something in his voice had. Your mother was not like us. Us? My family. And you? He held her gaze. I stopped pretending I was different from them years ago. The honesty unsettled her more than denial. A metallic impact echoed through the tunnel behind them. One of Dante's men turned. Movement. The conveyor lights died. Darkness swallowed them. Dante's hand closed around Sophie's wrist. Not roughly. Absolutely. Stay with me. Flashlights cut through the blackness behind them. Gunfire cracked against the concrete. Dante pulled Sophie behind a support column. His men returned fire. Sparks exploded from the steel frame overhead. A bullet struck one of the conveyor controls. The belt beside Sophie jerked violently. Her coat caught between two rotating wheels. She gasped as the machinery dragged her sideways. Dante saw it. He left cover. One of his men shouted his name, but Dante crossed the open tunnel under gunfire, grabbed Sophie around the waist, and pulled. The fabric held. The conveyor dragged them both closer. Dante drew a knife from inside his coat and cut through the material. They fell backward just as the coat vanished between the rollers. A shot struck the concrete inches from his head. He covered Sophie and fired twice toward the approaching lights. Both flashlights dropped. Silence followed. Dante remained over her, one hand braced beside her face. His breathing had finally changed. Not from exertion. From fear. He looked at the empty space where her coat had disappeared, then back at her. You could have been killed. So could you. That is not the same. It is exactly the same. No. His voice sharpened. It is not. She stared up at him, suddenly aware of every point where their bodies touched. His chest against hers, his hand around her waist, his face close enough that she could see the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow. The air between them changed. For one suspended second, the tunnel, the gunfire, and the danger seemed to recede. Dante's gaze dropped to her mouth. His hand moved slightly against her side. Then he stopped himself. He stood and pulled her up with him. The restraint felt more intimate than a kiss. One of his men approached. The shooters are gone. Dead? Sophie asked. The bodyguard looked toward Dante. Dante answered without emotion. They will not follow us. Sophie knew what that meant. She also knew Dante had crossed open ground to save her without hesitation. Fear and trust twisted together inside her until she could no longer separate them. They reached a maintenance control room 20 minutes later. Dante's men secured the doors, while Sophie activated an old terminal, disconnected from the main airport network. The screen flickered to life. She inserted the black ring into a circular indentation beneath the keyboard. It fit perfectly. A hidden program opened. Dante stepped closer. Files filled the screen. Account numbers. Shell corporations. Passenger manifests. Photographs of politicians, judges, union officials, and men Sophie had seen on international news. At the top of the directory was a folder labeled E.L. Evelyn Lane. Sophie's hands went cold. She opened it. A video appeared. Her mother sat in the same control room, visibly younger, wearing the navy coat Sophie remembered from childhood. Evelyn looked directly into the camera. "Sophie, if you are seeing this, then Dante Bellini has either failed to protect you or finally trusted you enough to tell you the truth." Sophie turned toward him. Dante's jaw tightened. The video continued. The Bellini family built its empire through ports, construction contracts, and fear. But someone inside that family has been quietly selling information to rival organizations and federal agencies while eliminating anyone who discovers the pattern. Documents flashed across the screen. The black ring contains the key to a financial archive. Dante's father gave it to me because he no longer trusted his own brother. A photograph appeared. Dante, as a young man, stood beside an older, dignified figure. Vittorio Bellini, Dante's uncle. The man frequently photographed beside governors, senators, and international business leaders. Evelyn's voice continued. "If Vittorio learns you have this archive, he will not simply kill you. He will use you to control Dante. Because Dante's greatest weakness has always been believing he has none." Dante looked away from the screen. Sophie felt her heartbeat in her throat. Her mother leaned closer to the camera. "I made a bargain to keep you alive. I gave Vittorio incomplete access to the accounts, and in return, he allowed the world to believe I disappeared. But bargains with men like him never last." The video glitched. "If Dante is with you, listen carefully. Do not trust his anger. Do not trust his silence. And do not mistake his protection for innocence. He has done terrible things, but when the moment came, he was the only Bellini who tried to save me." The recording ended. Sophie stood motionless. Dante remained beside her, his face unreadable. "You knew she was alive," Sophie said. "I knew she survived the night she disappeared. Where is she? I do not know. Do not lie to me. I am not. You watched me for 14 months. You knew about the ring. You knew my mother worked for your family. Yes. And you said nothing. If I had approached you, Vittorio would have known you mattered. He already knew. I was trying to determine how much. You let me believe she abandoned me." The accusation struck him. She saw it. Dante had probably faced guns without flinching. But Sophie's grief reached somewhere violence could not. "I was 22 when she disappeared," he said. "My father had just been murdered. My mother died 2 weeks later. I found Evelyn in a warehouse near the river before Vittorio's men arrived." Sophie's anger faltered. "She was injured. She made me promise not to contact you until I could prove who controlled the family accounts. I moved her to a safe location. 3 days later, she vanished again. By SCOM. 3.com. Time. Halv. She was injured. You lost her. Yes, the word was stripped of pride. I have searched for her ever since." Sophie looked back at the frozen image of her mother. "You should have told me. I should have done many things differently. But you didn't." "No." A siren began pulsing through the underground level. The timer from the terminal screens appeared on the computer. 0:02:16. Dante looked at the map. Hangar 12. Sophie saw a blinking red point beneath the hangar rather than inside it. "That's not an assassination location." "What is it?" "A fuel control junction." Understanding darkened Dante's face. "They never intended to shoot you there. They intend to destroy the hangar." With everyone inside, Dante turned to his men. "Clear the area." The bodyguard tried his radio again. Still blocked. Sophie moved to another keyboard. "There's an emergency line routed through baggage operations." She entered commands, but the system rejected her password. Dante placed the ring into a second reader. The controls unlocked. Sophie activated the hangar evacuation alarm. Nothing happened. "Manual override disabled," she said. Dante looked at the countdown. 1 minute, 30 seconds. "How far?" 300 yards through the service tunnel. His men exchanged glances. Dante removed his coat and placed it around Sophie's shoulders. You are staying here. No. This room is reinforced, and the fuel lines run directly beneath it. His expression hardened. Sophie, you need someone who knows the junction controls. I will send one of my men. They don't know the airport. You are not going. You shut down an entire terminal because you refused to leave without me. Now you expect me to hide while hundreds of workers are above an explosive fuel line? Dante stepped close enough to block the screen from her view. You are not responsible for everyone. Neither are you. No. His gaze burned into hers. Only you. The confession emerged before he could stop it. Silence pressed between them. Dante's face closed immediately, but it was too late. Sophie had heard the truth beneath the command. Not affection. Not yet. Something more dangerous. Need. The countdown reached 1 minute. Sophie moved past him. He caught her hand. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Dante's fingers loosened. If you leave my side, he said quietly, I will carry you out of this airport myself. Then keep up. They ran. The service tunnel beneath Hangar 12 shook as the storm intensified above them. Red lights flashed along the walls. The fuel junction appeared ahead behind a locked steel gate. Sophie entered her employee code. Access denied. Dante fired at the lock. The mechanism broke, and they forced the gate open. Inside, valves vibrated under increasing pressure. The countdown showed 30 seconds. Sophie found the emergency release. It needs 2 controls turned simultaneously. Dante took the opposite station. On 3, they turned the wheels. Nothing happened. Again, the metal resisted. Dante's injured hand slipped, blood darkening his palm where broken glass had cut him earlier. Sophie braced both feet against the floor. Now, they forced the wheels together. The pressure gauge dropped. The timer reached 0. A violent explosion thundered above them. The ceiling cracked. Dante crossed the room and threw Sophie to the floor as fire rushed through the ventilation shaft. His body covered hers while debris collapsed around them. The lights died. For several seconds, Sophie heard only the ringing in her ears. Then Dante's voice. Sophie. She opened her eyes. He was still over her. Dust streaked his face. Blood ran from his shoulder. I'm all right. He touched her cheek as if verifying she existed. The tenderness in the gesture was so unguarded that they both froze. Dante withdrew his hand. A section of ceiling had fallen across the exit. One of his men was unconscious. The others began clearing debris. Sophie looked at Dante's shoulder. You're hurt. It is superficial. You always say that? Only when it is true. That is bleeding through a very expensive shirt. His mouth almost moved. Not quite a smile. The first one she had nearly seen. They found another route through the drainage system and emerged 40 minutes later near a private cargo terminal. Rain hammered the runway. Emergency vehicles surrounded Hangar 12, where flames climbed into the night. Airport workers stood behind barriers, shaken but alive. Dante's evacuation warning had reached enough of them before the explosion. A line of black SUVs waited near the terminal. Sophie stopped. You are not putting me in one of those. The airport is compromised. So is your organization. Yes. The direct admission surprised her. Dante looked toward the burning hangar. I have 3 locations Vittorio does not know. You thought he didn't know about this airport. I did not say he was not aware of them. I said he does not know which one I will choose. That is not comforting. It was not meant to be. A blonde woman in a fitted black suit approached from the vehicles. She moved with the confidence of someone who belonged beside powerful men. Dante. Her eyes went immediately to Sophie, then to the coat around Sophie's shoulders. The woman's expression tightened. We need to move, she said. Federal agents are arriving. Dante gestured toward her. Sophie Lane. This is Alessia Romano, my legal advisor. Alessia gave Sophie a restrained nod. Is she the reason you grounded half of JFK? She is the reason I am alive. Something passed through Alessia's face. Jealousy, or fear. Sophie could not tell which disturbed her more. They entered the center SUV. Dante sat beside Sophie, while Alessia faced them from the opposite seat. As the convoy moved across the rain-covered service road, Alessia opened a tablet. News stations are already reporting that Bellini security caused a panic at the airport. Someone leaked footage of your men drawing weapons. Vittorio, Dante said. He is appearing on television in 20 minutes to condemn the violence. Sophie looked between them. Your uncle is going to publicly blame you. He will present himself as the reasonable Bellini, Dante said, concerned about his unstable nephew. Alessia glanced at Sophie. And he will say the airport employee was taken hostage. Wasn't I? Sophie asked. Dante's gaze settled on her. You are free to leave the moment. I can guarantee you will survive doing so. That sounds like imprisonment with better upholstery. Alessia looked away, hiding the beginning of a smile. Dante did not. You have not seen my prisons. The remark should have frightened Sophie. Instead, she heard the dry edge beneath it and realized he was capable of humor, though it seemed to annoy him. The convoy left the airport and entered Queens. Sophie watched the city blur behind rain-streaked windows. A news broadcast played silently on Alessia's tablet. Vittorio Bellini stood before microphones outside a Manhattan courthouse. He had silver hair, kind eyes, and the polished concern of a man trusted by people who did not know what he was. The headline beneath him read, Bellini Air linked to JFK terror incident. Then Sophie's employee photograph appeared. Missing airport worker feared abducted. She works quickly, Sophie said. Dante corrected. Sophie looked at him. Alessia did not leak your photograph. I didn't accuse her. You looked at her. Alessia raised one eyebrow. He notices everything. Dante's attention remained on Sophie. The intensity made the interior of the SUV feel smaller. Is that why you watched me for 14 months? She asked. To notice everything? No. Then why? His expression closed. Because someone had to. The answer stayed with her long after the convoy entered Manhattan. Dante's safe house occupied the upper floors of an unfinished skyscraper overlooking the East River. The lobby appeared abandoned, but armed guards controlled every entrance. The penthouse above was all dark stone, smoked glass, and quiet luxury. It did not feel like a home. It felt like a fortress built by a lonely man who expected every door to be breached. A doctor treated Dante's shoulder in a private study. Sophie stood near the window, still wearing his coat. Dante removed his shirt without ceremony. She tried not to look. She failed. There were scars across his torso. Some clean and narrow. Others rough, old, and violent. A bullet scar marked the space beneath his ribs. The doctor cleaned the wound. Dante did not react. You can wait outside, he told Sophie. You covered me during an explosion. I think I can survive seeing a bandage. His eyes met hers. Something warm and dangerous moved through the silence. The doctor finished and left. Dante buttoned a black shirt over the dressing. Sophie noticed a framed photograph on the desk. A young Dante stood with his parents at an airport. His mother held the black ring box. Behind them, barely visible near a column, stood Evelyn Lane. My mother was there, Sophie said. Dante followed her gaze. It was the last photograph taken before my father died. What happened? His plane exploded after takeoff. At JFK? From a private airfield in New Jersey. And your mother? She was killed in what police called a home invasion. You believe Vittorio ordered both murders. I know he did, but you cannot prove it. Proof matters in courtrooms. In my world, certainty is enough. That sounds convenient. It is often fatal. Sophie picked up the photograph. Why would your father trust my mother over his own family? Because Evelyn understood numbers better than loyalty. Numbers do not pretend to love you while preparing your funeral. The bitterness in his voice was quiet. She set the frame down. My mother's message said you tried to save her. I was too late. You were 22. I had men, money, power. You were grieving. That did not make her less missing. Sophie studied him. For the first time, she saw the young man beneath the feared mafia boss. The son who had inherited an empire, built by people he could not trust. Is that why you protected me? At first. And later? Dante turned toward the windows. The city lights reflected across the glass, surrounding him with 1,000 fractured versions of himself. You worked nights when you could have requested days. You gave your lunch to a homeless veteran outside Terminal 4 every Thursday. You spent 3 months searching for the owner of a child's stuffed bear because the girl had cried when her family returned to London. Sophie stared at him. You read passenger files? I had someone identify the owner. That is not the point. You asked why. You knew all of that about me. Yes. Did you know what I ate for breakfast? Usually nothing. Coffee at 9:20. A bagel around 11 if your supervisor reminded you. The room seemed to tilt. That is not protection. No. His answer came too quickly. Sophie's pulse accelerated. What is it? Dante faced her again. Something I had no intention of naming. Before she could respond, the study doors opened. Alessia entered with a laptop and a hard expression. We have a problem. Dante's face transformed instantly. Whatever vulnerability had existed, disappeared behind command. What? The man who delivered the ring has been identified. His name is Thomas Vale, former federal intelligence contractor. He worked with Evelyn. You are Gobley Cess. End of 2. The man who delivered the ring. Where is he? Dead. Found in an airport service vehicle. Sophie closed her eyes briefly. She had known. Still, grief moved through her for the stranger who had carried her mother's message through a storm. Alessia placed the laptop on the desk. There is more. Thomas made a call before entering the terminal. A recording began. Thomas's voice filled the room. The ring is with Sophie. Bellini will take her. Proceed to phase 2. Sophie stared at the speakers. He delivered me to you. Dante's expression darkened. Alessia paused the audio. Vittorio wanted Dante to take you. The airport attack was designed to force you together. Why? To make Dante appear responsible for your abduction, Alessia said, and to draw both of you somewhere private. Sophie looked at Dante. This safe house. A distant impact shook the windows. The lights went out. Gunfire erupted below. Dante crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled Sophie away from the glass. Alessia drew a weapon from beneath her jacket. South stairwell compromised. Dante touched an earpiece. Report. Static. Then a guard's broken voice. They are inside. Dante opened a hidden panel behind the bookcase, revealing a private elevator. Sophie, go with Alessia. No. His gaze sharpened. I am not debating this. You said someone inside your organization is helping Vittorio. How do I know it isn't her? Alessia looked offended. Dante looked almost proud. You don't, Sophie continued, and neither do you. Another explosion sounded below. Dante turned to Alessia. Take the east elevator. Meet us at Harbor 3. Alessia stared at him. You are trusting her over me? I am removing the question. The hurt on Alessia's face was real. She stepped into the elevator alone. The doors closed. Sophie looked at Dante. What if she is loyal? Then she will understand. And if she isn't, she will lead them away. The cold calculation reminded Sophie exactly who he was. Dante opened a second hidden passage behind the desk. They descended through a narrow steel staircase as armed men entered the penthouse above. Halfway down, Sophie heard voices. Dante pushed her into a shallow wall recess and covered her mouth with one hand. His body pressed against hers in the darkness. 2 men passed below. Sophie could feel Dante's breath near her temple. His hand remained over her mouth, but his thumb rested lightly against her cheek. The danger should have consumed her attention. Instead, she became painfully aware of the restraint in him. He could overpower her without effort. Yet every point of contact seemed measured, controlled, almost careful. The footsteps faded. Dante lowered his hands slowly. Neither moved. You trust her, Sophie whispered. Alessia? Yes, with my business, but not with me. His eyes held hers in the darkness. No one is trusted with you. The possessiveness in his voice should have made her step away. She did not. Dante's gaze dropped to her mouth again. This time, Sophie felt herself lean closer before she understood she was doing it. An explosion above sent dust through the stairwell. The moment shattered. Dante took her hand and led her downward. They escaped through a construction tunnel connected to an underground parking garage. A black sedan waited beside an elevator. Dante drove himself. Rain turned the streets into rivers as they crossed lower Manhattan toward the harbor. Sophie watched him grip the steering wheel, blood seeping through the bandage beneath his shirt. You need a hospital. No, of course not. The police are searching hospitals. You own doctors. Vittorio owns more. They reached an industrial pier near Red Hook. A private boat waited beneath a rusted warehouse. Dante stopped the car but did not get out. His gaze remained on the windshield. The call from Thomas was edited. Sophie looked at him. How do you know? He said, Bellini will take her. Thomas knew me. If he meant me, he would have said Dante. He could have been referring to the family. Yes. Which Bellini? Dante looked toward the dark water. My sister. Sophie went still. You have a sister? Head. The single word carried an entire graveyard. Isabella was 16 when my parents were killed. Vittorio told me she died in the same attack as my mother. But you don't believe him anymore. Dante's jaw tightened. Evelyn's files contain monthly transfers to a private medical foundation in Switzerland under Isabella's childhood name. She may be alive. If she is, Vittorio has kept her hidden for 14 years. To control you? To replace me. A new layer of the conspiracy opened before Sophie. An inheritance conflict. A hidden Bellini heir. A missing mother. A ring designed to unlock the truth. The sound of an engine approached across the harbor. A second boat emerged from the rain. Dante reached beneath his jacket. The boat flashed its lights twice. He relaxed slightly. Alessia stepped onto the pier minutes later, soaked and furious. You could have warned me the east elevator opened into a gunfight. You survived, Dante said. Your confidence is touching. Her gaze moved to Sophie. I traced the attack. One of Vittorio's shell companies purchased the construction firm that built your safe house. Dante looked toward the water. Harbor 3 is exposed. It was exposed before we arrived. Floodlights ignited across the warehouse. Armed men appeared along the upper walkways. Dante pulled Sophie behind the car as bullets struck the pier. Alessia returned fire. A fuel drum exploded near the water, filling the warehouse with orange light. Dante dragged Sophie toward the boat. A shooter appeared behind them. Sophie saw him before Dante did. Down. She pulled Dante sideways. The bullet struck the car window. Dante fired once. The shooter fell. He looked at Sophie with a mixture of anger and terror. You do not pull me into gunfire. You prefer being shot? I prefer you behind me. A second explosion ripped through the warehouse. The dock collapsed. Sophie fell into the freezing water. Darkness closed over her. She surfaced beneath burning debris, coughing as rain struck her face. The current pulled her under the broken pier. She heard Dante shouting her name. Then he was in the water. He found her beneath a beam and wrapped one arm around her waist. Hold on, Tommy. The tide dragged them toward the pilings. Dante shielded her head as debris struck his back. He pulled her through a gap and toward the waiting boat. Men were still firing from the warehouse. Dante pushed Sophie over the side first. Alessia helped drag her aboard. Dante climbed after her, soaked and bleeding. The boat accelerated into the harbor while flames swallowed the pier behind them. Sophie shivered uncontrollably. Dante removed his wet jacket and wrapped her in a thermal blanket from beneath the seat. You jumped after me, she said. He knelt in front of her. There was no other outcome. You could have sent someone. His expression became frighteningly calm. There is no one I would trust to bring you back. The harbor lights moved across his face. Sophie reached toward the cut near his temple. Her fingers stopped before touching him. Dante caught her hand gently and pressed her palm against his cheek. The gesture undid something inside her. For a few seconds, the feared man closed his eyes. He leaned into her touch like someone who had been denied tenderness so long that receiving it felt almost painful. Then the boat turned sharply. Dante released her and stood. The moment disappeared behind command once again. They reached a hidden safe house on the north shore of Long Island before dawn. It was an old mansion overlooking a violent gray sea, lit by candles because the property had been removed from the electrical grid. The place belonged to Dante's mother. No guards waited outside. No staff moved through the halls. Only the three of them entered. Alessia secured the doors while Sophie changed into dry clothes from a guest room. The sweater was too large and smelled faintly of cedar. When she entered the library, Dante stood before a fire in a black shirt and dark trousers. His wet hair had been pushed back. Fresh bandages covered his shoulder and ribs. A wall of photographs lay arranged across a long table. Evane, Vittorio, Dante's parent, a teenage girl Sophie recognized as Isabella, and herself, photographs taken at JFK, outside her apartment, in a grocery store, sitting alone in a park. Sophie stopped. You brought them here. Dante did not turn. I kept copies at every secure property. She moved closer to the table. Some photographs had handwritten dates. Others included notes about her schedule, acquaintances, and routes home. This is more than protection. Yes, he finally faced her. There was nowhere left for either of them to hide. When did it change? Sophie asked. Dante's expression remained controlled, but his eyes did not. The winter, you worked 3 consecutive shifts during the blizzard. That was 2 years ago. You slept behind the counter because the train stopped. A passenger left her infant's medication in a taxi. You spent 6 hours finding the driver. You were watching me before 14 months ago. Yes. How long? 4 years. The answer left her speechless. I first saw you at your mother's memorial service, he said. You stood alone after everyone left. You refused to allow them to put up a headstone because you said she was not dead. You were there, across the cemetery. Why didn't you speak to me? I had nothing to give you except danger. And now? Now danger has already found you. Sophie looked down at the photographs. Did you ever plan to tell me? No. The honesty hurt. Then what did you plan? To keep you alive. To find Evelyn. To remove anyone who came close to you. and to remain far enough away that you could have a life untouched by mine. You sat in cars outside my building. Sometimes. You knew my routine. Yes. You collected photographs. Yes. That is obsession, Dante. His face became still. I know. No excuse. No denial. The admission filled the candlelit room with a dangerous intimacy. Sophie looked toward the windows, where dawn struggled behind storm clouds. You do not get to decide that watching me is love. I did not call it love. Then what is it? Dante stepped closer. An appetite I spent 4 years starving. Her breath caught. He stopped inches away. His hand rose as though he meant to touch her face. But once again, he restrained himself. You should fear me, he said. I do. The answer affected him. And yet you are still here. I'm here because my mother is connected to your family. That is not the only reason. Sophie's heartbeat quickened. You think you know what I feel? No. His voice lowered. I know how you look at me. When you forget you hate me. I don't hate you. That is worse. Their eyes held. The air between them became almost unbearable. Dante leaned closer. Not enough to kiss her. Enough that she felt his breath. Then Alessia entered. We found Isabella. Dante stepped away so quickly, the loss of warmth felt physical. Alessia placed a tablet on the table. A recent photograph showed a pale woman with dark hair entering a private clinic in Switzerland. She arrived in New York 3 days ago under another identity, Alessia said. Her flight landed at JFK. Sophie understood first. Your sister delivered the plan through Thomas. Or Vittorio used her name, Dante said. The clinic arranged a car to take her to St. Catherine's Hospital in Brooklyn, Alessia continued. A private psychiatric wing. Dante's expression became lethal. Vittorio kept her medicated. For 14 years, Alessia said. Sophie looked at the black ring. Your father's archive may contain proof that Isabella is the legitimate controlling heir. Dante nodded. If Vittorio presents her publicly as unstable, he can become her legal guardian and control the empire through her. And you stand in the way. So do you. A phone rang. Not one of theirs. The sound came from inside the velvet ring box. Alessia opened a hidden compartment beneath the lining and removed a tiny device. Dante answered. Vittorio's voice filled the library. Good morning, nephew. Dante's face revealed nothing. Where is Isabella? A quiet laugh. Always impatient. Your father had the same flaw. If you touched her, I kept her alive. You should thank me. Sophie heard movement on the other end. Then a woman's weak voice. Dante? Every trace of color left his face. Isabella. She began crying. I'm sorry. I tried to get the ring to you. Dante's hand tightened around the phone. Where are you? Vittorio returned. Bring Sophie and the archive to St. Catherine's Chapel at noon. Come without your army, or your sister receives enough medication to forget your name forever. The call ended. Dante stood motionless. Sophie had seen him under gunfire. She had watched him cross an open tunnel to save her. She had seen anger, control, and obsession. She had never seen him break. His hand lowered. For 1 second, he looked like the 22-year-old who had lost his entire family and never allowed himself to mourn. Sophie moved toward him. He stepped back. Do not. Dante. If you touch me now, I will not let you go. The rawness of the confession stopped her. He turned away, bracing both hands against the table. I believed she was dead. Sophie approached more slowly. She is alive, because Vittorio needed a weapon. She survived, and now he wants to exchange her for you. Sophie stood behind him. You're not giving him either. Dante laughed once, without humor. You still believe there is an outcome where everyone walks away. I believe that is the outcome we fight for. He turned. His control was gone. Not completely. Enough. If I must choose between Isabella and you, I will choose you. The words shocked both women. Alessia looked down. Sophie's chest tightened. You cannot mean that. I do. She is your sister. And you are... He stopped. Sophie waited. Dante could command hundreds of men. He could close an airport, start wars, and order death without raising his voice. But he could not finish that sentence. Not yet. Sophie stepped closer. I will not let you save me by becoming the reason she dies. You do not control what I am willing to destroy for you. No, but I control whether I forgive you afterward. The words reached him. She saw the calculation change. Dante looked toward the archive. What are you proposing? A trade Vittorio thinks is real. At noon, rain covered Brooklyn in a silver veil. St. Catherine's Hospital had once belonged to a Catholic order before being converted into a private facility for wealthy patients whose families paid to keep their suffering invisible. The chapel remained at the center of the oldest wing. Sophie entered through the front doors carrying the velvet box. Dante walked beside her without a coat, his black suit hiding the bandages beneath it. No guards followed them, at least none Vittorio could see. Alessia had gone to federal prosecutors with copies of Evelyn's archive and instructions to release everything if Sophie failed to call within an hour. It was not trust in the law. It was mutually assured destruction. The chapel doors opened. Isabella sat in a wheelchair before the altar. She was 30 now, but appeared younger, fragile from years of confinement. Her dark hair fell around a face that resembled Dante's mother. Vittorio stood behind her with one hand on her shoulder. 6 armed men occupied the pews. Dante stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. Isabella looked at him. Dante. He moved toward her. 3 guns rose. Vittorio smiled. Slowly, Sophie felt the tension radiating from Dante. His gaze never left his sister. I thought you were dead. I thought you chose not to find me, Isabella whispered. Pain crossed his face. Vittorio had spent years poisoning both of them. Dante looked at his uncle. I will kill you for that. Perhaps, but not before you give me the ring. Sophie raised the velvet box. Vittorio's eyes shifted to her. So much of your mother in your face. Where is she? Alive the last time I checked. Dante turned sharply. Sophie forced herself to remain still. Where? She demanded. Vittorio smiled. Your mother understood that disappearing was the only way to protect you. Unfortunately, she eventually became inconvenient. You said she was alive. I said the last time I checked. Dante took one step forward. A gun pressed against Isabella's head. He stopped. Vittorio extended his hand. The ring. Sophie walked down the aisle. Dante caught her wrist. No. She looked into his eyes. Trust me. His grip tightened. She felt the war inside him, the need to protect her, against the knowledge that controlling her would destroy the trust she had offered. Slowly, Dante released her. Sophie approached the altar alone. Vittorio took the box. He opened it. The black ring lay inside. His satisfaction lasted 2 seconds. Then the chapel speakers activated. Evelyn Lane's voice filled the room. If you are hearing this broadcast, Vittorio Bellini has attempted to access the archive. Vittorio's face changed. Sophie stepped backward. The ring was not the archive key. It was a transmitter. Every account, recording, payment, and murder order linked to Vittorio was being uploaded simultaneously to federal servers and international news organizations. Vittorio threw the box to the floor. Killer. Dante moved before the gunman did. He overturned the nearest pew and pulled Sophie behind it as gunfire tore through the chapel. Stained glass shattered above them. Isabella screamed. Dante fired toward the altar while Sophie crawled along the floor. One of Vittorio's men grabbed Isabella's wheelchair. Sophie reached her first and locked the wheels. The gunman struck Sophie across the face. She fell beside the altar. Dante saw it. Something inside him broke. He crossed the chapel through gunfire with no regard for cover. One attacker fell. Then another. Dante reached the man who had struck Sophie and drove him against a stone column with terrifying force. Dante, Sophie shouted. He stopped only because she called his name. That frightened her more than the violence. Vittorio dragged Isabella toward a side door. Sophie grabbed the fallen ring box and threw it. It struck the fire alarm. Sprinklers erupted across the chapel. Smoke from a damaged electrical panel filled the air. Dante reached Isabella and pulled her away from Vittorio. His uncle raised a gun. Sophie stepped between them without thinking. The shot fired. Dante caught her. For one endless second, Sophie expected pain. None came. Dante looked down. Blood spread across his side. He had turned his body in front of hers. Again. Vittorio aimed a second time. Isabella seized a fallen weapon from the floor. Her hands trembled violently. Uncle! Vittorio turned. The gunshot echoed through the chapel. He fell beneath the shattered image of a saint. Silence followed except for the rain of sprinklers. Isabella dropped the weapon. Dante sank to one knee. Sophie caught him. No. His blood covered her hands. It missed anything important, he said through clenched teeth. You don't know that. I know where my important organs are. This is not the time. His hand found the back of her neck. Even wounded, his first instinct was to pull her closer. You stood in front of me. You have done it enough times. You never do that again. Then stop getting shot. Sirens approached outside. Federal agents entered the chapel with Alessia behind them. Dante looked at his legal advisor. You brought the government. You brought 6 armed men into a hospital chapel, Alessia replied. We all made compromises. Paramedics surrounded Dante. He refused to release Sophie's hand. They loaded him onto a stretcher. An agent tried to separate them. Dante's eyes turned cold. She stays. The agent hesitated. Sophie climbed into the ambulance beside him. Rain streaked the rear windows as the chapel disappeared. Dante watched her through half-closed eyes. Isabella? Alive. Alessia is with her. The archive? Public. My empire may be gone by morning. Sophie pressed gauze against his wound. Are you afraid? No. Liar. His gaze softened. Only of waking up without you. The confession was quiet. There was no command in it. No possession. Only truth. Sophie looked at the man who had watched her from shadows for 4 years. Who had lied to protect her. Endangered her through silence. And crossed fire. Water. And an entire city whenever she disappeared from his sight. You don't get to keep me because you saved me, she said. I know. You don't get to monitor my home. I know. You don't get to decide where I go. His mouth tightened. That condition will require practice. Don't. I know. She almost smiled despite the blood between them. His fingers moved weakly around hers. And if I stay, she said, it will be because I choose you, not because you locked every door. He looked at her with an intensity that made the sirens feel distant. Then I will spend the rest of my life making certain you continue to choose me. Dante survived surgery. The bullet passed through his side without striking his spine or major organs, though the surgeon warned that another inch would have killed him. Sophie remained at the hospital for 36 hours. Not because Dante demanded it. Because every time she tried to leave his room, she remembered his expression in the ambulance. Only of waking up without you. When he regained consciousness, he found Sophie asleep in a chair beside his bed, her head resting near his hand. He did not wake her. He simply watched her breathe. When Sophie opened her eyes, morning light filled the room. Dante was awake. You're staring, she said. I have been told it is a problem. She sat up. How long? 43 minutes. That is deeply unsettling. You stayed. For now. His expression became serious. I will accept for now. Over the next week, the Bellini empire fractured. Vittorio's files exposed judges, law enforcement officials, corporate executives, and members of 3 rival organizations. Federal arrests spread across New York and New Jersey. Television networks replayed footage from JFK, the burning hangar, and the hospital chapel. Sophie's name was cleared publicly when the surveillance files proved she had been targeted. Dante was not arrested. Alessia negotiated immunity for evidence connected to Vittorio's network, though several Bellini businesses were seized or dissolved. Dante lost ports, casinos, political influence, and nearly half his fortune. He did not appear to care. Isabella entered a private recovery clinic under federal protection. She visited Dante twice before he left the hospital. Their reunion was quiet and difficult. 14 years could not be repaired in a week. But when Isabella left the second time, Dante kissed her forehead. Sophie saw his eyes close briefly. A brother remembering how to love without fear. There was still no sign of Evelyn. Then, 3 weeks after the chapel attack, Sophie received a postcard at JFK. No return address. The front showed a quiet village on the Italian coast. On the back, beneath a single line, was the crescent symbol cutting through the letter L. I needed Vittorio to believe I was dead. Forgive me for allowing you to believe it too. Sophie's hands shook. A telephone number was written below. She called from the lost and found office. A woman answered after 1 ring. Neither spoke at first. Then Evelyn Lane said, Hello, Sophie. 14 years of grief collapsed into one breath. Sophie sat behind the counter while passengers moved around her, unaware that a missing life had just returned. Her mother was alive, living under protection in southern Italy. She had stayed hidden because Vittorio's network reached into every agency that might have helped her. Thomas Vale had found her 6 months earlier and agreed to carry the ring to Sophie when Isabella escaped from the Swiss clinic. Thomas had known he might die. He had gone anyway. Sophie cried for him after the call ended. She cried for the years lost with her mother. And she cried because the impossible had happened. The airport had returned what the world had taken. That evening, Sophie finished her shift at 9. When she entered the arrivals hall, Dante stood near the glass wall overlooking the runway. No bodyguards surrounded him. No terminal had been closed. He wore a dark coat over his healing wound and held 2 cups of coffee. Passengers moved past without recognizing him, or pretended not to. Sophie approached. How did you know? Your mother called Isabella. You spoke to her? For 2 minutes. What did she say? That if I hurt you, she still remembers where my father buried bodies. Sophie stared at him. Dante handed her a coffee. I like her. A laugh escaped Sophie before she could stop it. Dante watched her as though the sound was something rare. She took the cup. You came without an army. They are outside. Of course they are. Far outside. That must be painful for you. Extremely. They stood together before the rain-dark runway. A plane lifted into the night. Do you still own the black ring? Sophie asked. It belongs to you now. I don't want it. It unlocked the archive. It also nearly got us killed repeatedly. Affaire objection. Dante reached into his coat. Sophie tensed. He removed a smaller velvet box. She stared at it. No, you have not seen what is inside. The last velvet box shut down an airport. This one is less political. He opened it. Inside lay a simple silver key. Sophie looked at him. What does it open? The front door of a house in Queens. You bought a house? I bought the building beside yours. That sounds more like you. It has no surveillance cameras inside. Inside? Dante's mouth almost curved. Negotiation is a gradual process. Sophie shook her head, but warmth moved through her. I'm not moving into a house you bought. I know. Then why give me the key? The ground floor belongs to you. For what? A foundation. She waited. To help families search for missing people, Dante said. Private investigators, legal support, international databases. No one should have to wait 14 years because the wrong men control the truth. Sophie looked down at the key. This was not a gift designed to own her. It was an offering built from everything he had lost. My mother gave you the idea. No. Then who? You did. The terminal announcements echoed softly around them. Sophie closed her fingers around the key. I haven't forgiven you for watching me. I know. I may never be comfortable with what you are. I know. You cannot threaten people every time they upset me. Dante considered this. I can try to threaten fewer people. That is not what I said. It is my strongest opening position. She looked at him. He was still dangerous. Still feared. Still capable of terrible things. Love had not transformed him into someone harmless. It had forced him to become honest about where his darkness ended and her freedom began. Sophie stepped closer. Dante went still. For all his power, he waited. She placed one hand against his chest. His heart beat hard beneath her palm. You said you would spend the rest of your life making sure I continue to choose you. Yes. That sounds exhausting. I have stamina. Don't you? His gaze dropped to her lips. Sophie felt the familiar tension rise between them. The restraint, the danger, the 4 years of distance, and the weeks of surviving each other. This is me choosing, she whispered. She kissed him. For 1 second, Dante did not move. Then his hand settled at her waist. Not pulling. Holding. The kiss was controlled at first, almost careful, as if he feared that too much hunger would send her away. Sophie touched the scar through his eyebrow. His restraint broke. Dante drew her closer and kissed her with every feeling he had refused to name. Fear, relief, obsession, hunger, and a devotion violent enough to have destroyed him if she had not returned it freely. When they separated, his forehead rested against hers. Tell me to stop, he said. She understood what the words cost him. A man who controlled everything was giving control to her. Not tonight. His eyes closed briefly. Outside, the storm began to clear. Months later, Terminal 4 looked exactly as it had before the explosion. Travelers argued over delayed flights. Children slept across suitcases. Announcements disappeared beneath the endless roar of departures and arrivals. Sophie still worked at the lost and found counter 3 days a week, despite Dante's repeated claim that she no longer needed the salary. She reminded him that needing work and choosing meaningful work were different things. On the other 4 days, she managed the Lane Foundation from the building near her apartment. The foundation found missing witnesses, reunited families separated by criminal networks, and helped ordinary people challenge powerful institutions. Dante funded it without placing his name anywhere on the walls. Isabella joined the board after leaving treatment. Evelyn returned to New York slowly, under a new federal agreement, and enough security to make even Dante admit she was protected. Mother and daughter did not pretend the missing years had not changed them. They learned each other again. Some wounds closed quietly. Others remained as proof of survival. Dante rebuilt what remained of his organization into something narrower, less public, and no less feared. He abandoned the trafficking routes and political bribery that had flourished under Vittorio, though Sophie never asked exactly how he persuaded rival families to accept his reforms. She had learned not to ask questions when 3 crime bosses suddenly retired to countries without extradition treaties. He still traveled with bodyguards. He still spoke softly when everyone else was afraid. He still became dangerously calm whenever Sophie was threatened. But he asked before entering her apartment. He stopped monitoring her phone. Mostly. And whenever his old instincts turned protection into control, Sophie stood in front of him and reminded him that devotion without freedom was merely another kind of prison. Dante listened, not always gracefully, but always eventually. One winter night, Sophie closed the lost and found counter during a heavy snowstorm. The terminal had emptied after the final cancellations. She turned and found Dante sitting in the last row of chairs, dressed in black, holding a familiar velvet box. Sophie stopped. What did I say about those boxes? This one has been inspected. By whom? 6 security specialists. That does not reassure me. He approached the counter, the same place where they had first faced each other, the same terminal he had once shut down because he refused to leave without her. Dante placed the box between them. Sophie opened it carefully. Inside was the black Bellini ring, but the old crown and blade crest had been altered. The blade was gone. In its place was a small crescent passing through the letter L, her mother's symbol. Beside it lay another ring, a black diamond set in a simple silver band. Sophie looked up. Dante was already lowering himself to one knee. The sight stole her breath. The man who had never bowed to rivals, politicians, or kings knelt on the airport floor before an ordinary woman who had once refused to surrender his ring. No bodyguards stood nearby. No audience gathered. Only the snow beyond the windows and the quiet glow of the runway lights. I spent most of my life believing love was leverage, he said. Something enemies used to find where a man could be broken. Sophie's eyes filled. You prove them right. She laughed softly through the emotion. Dante's gaze never left hers. You are where I can be broken. You are also the reason I no longer consider survival enough. He opened his hand. The ring waited between them. I cannot promise to become harmless. I would know you were lying. I cannot promise I will never be controlling. You will be reminded. Frequently, I suspect. Every time. A faint smile touched his face. But I promise you will never again have to wonder whether you were chosen, he said. I chose you before I understood what choosing meant. I choose you now with nothing hidden. And I will choose you every day. You allow me to stand beside you. Sophie walked around the counter. Dante remained on one knee. She touched his face. 4 years earlier, he had watched her from across a cemetery because he believed distance was the only form of protection he could offer. Now he had given her the one thing power had never taught him to surrender. Choice. Yes, she whispered. The word changed him. Not visibly to anyone who did not know him. But Sophie knew every restrained breath, every guarded silence, every shift behind his eyes. She watched relief break through the feared mafia boss's composure. Dante slid the ring onto her finger. Then he pressed his forehead against her hand. For one quiet moment, he remained there. Not a king, not a criminal, not the man who had once closed an airport with a single command. Only Dante, the man who had finally found someone he could not control, could not replace, and could not leave behind. Sophie lowered herself in front of him. You know, she said, most people ask before shutting down an international terminal. I was under pressure. You surrounded my workplace with black SUVs. There was an assassination threat. You tracked me for 4 years. His expression became cautious. We agreed not to revisit every detail tonight. She smiled. Then she kissed him beneath the glowing departures board. Beyond the windows, the storm passed over New York. Aircraft began moving again across the snow-covered runway, carrying strangers toward reunions, escapes, beginnings, and endings. But Dante Bellini did not look toward the planes. He had once believed every person eventually left. That airports were places built to prove it. Now Sophie's hand rested in his, her ring catching the cold terminal light. And for the first time in his life, Dante was not watching someone disappear. He was standing beside the woman who had chosen to stay.